Last time on sluts, pedophiles, rebels, and light blue employees for hire. Yeah, you're right. Obamacare is bad. That Affordable Health Care Act was a terrible idea. You didn't need anything that was good for you anyway.
We got an issue in America. Too many good docs are getting out of business. Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country. Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
It was November 8th, 2000. I had just woken up on an air mattress in my small town 3-bedroom house, believing the United States had elected its 43rd president. But when I turned on the television, I became disillusioned. The right wing had pulled some shenanigans in Broward and Miami-Dade County. The vote count was still incomplete. Word was that some Democrats were confused about whom they had voted for. I was 23 and put school on hold, figuring I could always finish my degree later. I didn't. My two roommates were from small towns while I came from the second largest economic city in the States, Los Angeles. I had two roommates, and one of them was a conservative. The other, who went abroad, was like me, a liberal. But in this moment, we couldn't figure out what in God's name was occurring in real time here in these United States. Turns out, it wasn't just Democrats who were confused as to who they had voted for. Some independents had chimed in about how they could not understand the ballot or who it was they cast their vote for. Apparently, the circles that needed to be completely darkened and filled in weren't lining up correctly with the candidate they believed they chose. How could this have happened when it was explained that all the parties, donkeys and elephants, with some independent representatives, had agreed on the butterfly ballot? The 2000 election between Al Gore and George W. Bush was unforgettable and something I hope never gets repeated. Wish we had social media back then. Certainly someone would have noticed that something was eerily wrong with Broward and Miami-Dade counties' ballot. For that matter, all the ballots in counties with heavy African American or Latino turnout. The word would have gotten out earlier in the voting process, yet no one noticed it until it was time to vote on November 7th. In Palm Beach County, for example, 2,000 Democratic voters mistakenly voted for independent presidential candidate Pat Buchanan, a number larger than Bush's actual margin of victory. Why is this important beyond the obvious reasons stated? Well, only in Palm Beach did Pat Buchanan receive such an excessive number of votes. Some voters cast multiple votes for president on one ballot because they were that confused about who they were voting for. These confused voters were primarily from Broward and Miami-Dade counties during this election. Some of the ballots had the dreaded hanging chad, where the hole punch didn't sever the paper completely, leaving a small piece of paper hanging on or still attached to the ballot, preventing it from being counted by the machine. Then there was the pregnant Chad, which had dimples in the ballot, but the hole punch did not go through, leaving that vote uncounted. Absolute chaos. How could this happen in a first world country? 537 votes separated Bush from Gore. So they did a recount. Since the deadline of certification was approaching on January 6, the Democrats pushed for the recount to continue. So they went to Florida Supreme Court and had them step in. That court decided to keep counting. On the other hand, the Republicans wanted to move on to certifying their votes. Their candidate's lead had not changed, so they took their case to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided on December 12th of 2000, 6 weeks after the vote, to stop the recount in Florida, affecting the outcome by handpicking the 43rd president, thus creating the immaculate inception of George Walker Bush for president. And for the first time ever, the Supreme Court took the right to vote away from the people.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
I pray to the Lord that this never happens again. Since we love to borrow and spend money, perhaps we can get just a simple paper ballot of who do you love, this person or that person, and whatever measures that needs to be voted on. I mean, the Supreme Court elected a guy that would end up being the fourth highest spending president of all time. Bush spent $4 trillion in 8 years, causing every president after him to borrow and spend more and more money, adding to our illustrious, expensive ass national debt that all of us are going to have to pay for. And in today's time, a lot of these young folks, they're learning how to become business owners. They're learning how to become low budget taxpayers. They're learning how to become rich, which will eventually etch out the middle class, causing everybody else to be poor. The immaculate inception president handed the first black man, Obama, to become president, the worst economy since the Great Depression. Obama, a Democrat, is the fifth on the list of highest spending presidents because he had to dig the United States out of the hell Bush gifted him. That's why his economy looked like dog shit until he got control of it and it soared to the moon. Hell, Bush is the only president that took office and was handed a manageable recession, and by the time he exited, the country was in a great recession. Although he was gifted a surplus of money from the 42nd president, William Jefferson Clinton, a Democrat to whom the religious right in this country hates.
say, well, how can I help on this war against terror? How can I fight evil? You can do so by mentoring a child, by going into a shut-in's house and say, I love you. This society of ours is going to change one heart, one soul, one conscience at a time, because thousands of our fellow citizens are loving a neighbor just like they'd like to be loved themselves.
Speaking of the religious right, social conservatives had pretty much taken over the Republican Party by this point. They presumed George W. Bush was the only president that believed in God. Lord knows the Clintons could never. Bill cheats on his wife and Hillary is a murderer. Or were they both murderers? I can't remember, but they can never be saved by the Lord, their Savior. The evangelical Christians went beyond pushing an agenda of ridding this country of abortion. Oh no, they confused the United States as a Christian state, even though the quote on the money says, "In God we trust, not in Jesus Christ we trust." That would be unconstitutional. Makes it easier for the Muslims in this country to read, "In Allah we trust." Oddly enough, during Bush's 8 years in office, it appeared the religious right honestly hated the gays. They literally became Bush's catchphrase for those who attacked us on 9/11. They hate us for our freedom. Well, the religious right hated the gays for their freedom, freedom that the Constitution of the United States gave them. These are the same folks who will never vote for a woman for president because a woman can't lead a man, but they'll allow a woman to stand in the pulpit and give the word of God, leading man to the Lord. How does any of this make any sense? It doesn't. Especially when it wasn't long ago that a woman couldn't open a checking account without her husband's permission. I only have one question for the religious right in this country, or for anyone who believes in religion. Not saying that I don't. But do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in the Constitution of the United States? For it is written in your Holy Bible that if man can't follow man's law, then how can he follow God's law? I hope God honestly knows your heart, because I know what Jesus Christ said about the two ends of the road. And I'll leave that right here.
I asked Americans to give 4,000 hours over the rest of your life of service to America. That's what I asked. I said 4,000 hours. If you're a single mother with 2 children, which is the toughest job in America as far as I'm concerned, and you're working hard to put food on your family, those who think that they can say we're only going to have a stimulus package, but let's forget tax relief, underestimate. Just making sure you were paying attention. You were. I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully. The responses have got to end in order for us to get the framework, the groundwork to discuss a framework for peace, to lay that. All right. We are not at war with Muslims. We don't have a beef with Muslims. We want to be friends with Muslims and Muslim children. We're fighting evil people. It's important for the boys and girls of Thurgood Marshall to know that we're fighting evil with good. And one way to fight evil with good is you can help by writing letters to boys and girls your age. And so, in my State of the Union, or my speech to the nation, whatever you want to call it, speech to the nation. I asked Americans to give 4,000 hours over the rest of your life of service to America. That's what I asked. I said, 4,000 hours. There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again. Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we. Parents are teaching their children right from wrong, and the message oftentimes gets undermined by the popular culture. You bet there's things the government can do. We can work with the entertainment industry to provide family hour. We can have filters on internets where public money is spent. I hear there's rumors on the internets that we're going to have a draft. We're not going to have a draft, period. We got an issue in America. Too many good docs are getting out of business. Too many OBGYNs aren't able to practice their love with women all across this country. The good news is, and it's hard for some to see it now, that out of this chaos is going to come a fantastic Gulf Coast, like it was before. Out of the rubbles of Trent Lott's house, lost his entire house, there's going to be a fantastic house. Again, I want to thank you all and Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job.
God bless America.
Thank you for holding this awesome speech. And finally, people in Louisiana must know that all across our country there's a lot of prayer. Prayer for those whose lives have been turned upside down. And I'm one of them. One of the things I've used on the Google is to pull up maps. These are big achievements for this country, and the people of Bulgaria ought to be proud of the achievements that they have achieved. Another problem is proliferation. There are areas we can work together, and he brought an interesting proposal. He said, I have an idea. Why don't we jointly use a radar in Azerbaijan to help deal with a potential threat? Governor, thank you very much. I am here to make an announcement that this Thursday, ticket counters and airplanes will fly out of Ronald Reagan Airport. But here's a dreamer. Man had an idea. He didn't like the way the cotton shirts that he wore absorbed, his bodily fluids when he exercised, so he came up with a better product. Last night, Jeb and I had some crabs with like members of the 1972 Miami Dolphins, Dan Marino and his really dynamic wife, TV stars, Andy Garcia. It's just a fact. I met an onion grower today at the airport when I arrived, and he said, you got to help me find people that'll pull onions, pluck them or whatever you do with them, Just seems like I was here yesterday. I was. Kinda. I think tide turning, as I remember, I was raised in the desert, but tides kind of it's easy to see a tide turn. Did I say those words? I couldn't imagine somebody like Osama bin Laden understanding the joy of Hanukkah. People say, how can I help on this war against terror? How can I fight evil? You can do so by mentoring a child, by going into a shut-in's house and say, I love you. This society of ours is going to change one heart, one soul, one conscience at a time, because thousands of our fellow citizens are loving a neighbor just like they'd like to be loved themselves. Most of the new jobs in America are created by the small business sector, and our entrepreneurs are doing well. We got the best workforce in America, in the world. it was not always a given that the United States and America would have a close relationship.